I'm 46 and single. I live alone. I've got some cats. I have a dog. And I'm okay with it. I love my life. It is a good life. And I want to share my story with you of how I got here.
I'm 46 years old and living my best life, and it did not come easy. It didn't just happen. I'm here to share my experiences with you so you can live your best life too.
I've struggled for several days where to start this story because there was not one event, there was not one person, there was not one thing that pushed me onto this path all at one time. This was something that came gradually. Um, I, I'm just gonna summarize some background for you. My picker was broke from day one. I chose guys. I loved the bad boys. If they'd been in jail and they had a prison or a jail ID, well, that was a ticket to play with me. And I actually had a baby by one of them, my son, who was the joy, the moon in the darkest night. He lit my way. And then I got a little crazier. Hooked up with my daughter's father. We married. We actually were married for a couple of years. He had some things to work out for himself, so it didn't work out between us. But I had my daughter, who was my son. She was the light in my day. I was okay. And then I got online, and I met my second husband. That did not last. We had no children. It was one of the worst decisions I ever made because it resulted in my daughter being taken from me. It wasn't complete at first. It was joint parenting, joint custody. She's 3 days at my house, 4 days at his house, switch, and that went on for a couple of years until I got on meth. And then everything, I refer to those days as the dark days because that's the best way to describe them. I was crazy. I was on this toxic, nasty shit, and I couldn't think straight. I couldn't behave properly and lost custody of my children. I worked very hard for the next several years to get clean and to build a home for them that they could be in and be healthy, because that was part of the thing with my daughter. She had severe allergies and asthma, and I didn't have a good enough home according to the state of Tennessee. And we're going to fast forward because nothing was easy during those days, and I don't remember a lot of the details, but I do remember trying to find something to make me feel better. And I was diving deeper into alcohol instead of drugs, but that's no better. Alcohol is liquid. There's your difference between an alcohol and drugs. Alcohol is liquid. Nothing worked out for me in those days, and I was miserable all the time. I tried to kill myself a few times. I eventually completely lost custody of both of my children, and they were split up. Time goes by, my picker is still broke. I'm still slutting around like I was when I was a teenager and moving from place to place, homeless some of the time. I always had a job, and I usually had a side hustle, and sometimes that side hustle was legal and sometimes it wasn't. By the time I got into my 30s, I was still living like a teenager, basically. And I hooked up with this guy, and we're going to call him Jay. He was crazier than I was. I had kind of settled down by this point by the time I was about 32 or so. And I met Jay through a mutual friend. And for the next 4 years, um, I was his punching bag. He didn't hit me as much as he would wrestle me um, and choke me. That was one of his favorite things to do. To this day, I can't stand to have anything touch my neck because I'd been choked so many times. And on more than one occasion, I thought he was going to kill me. I've been strangled till I passed out. I've seen the stars, all of it. When I finally was able to get away from him, and I mean, I had to move a couple of times because he kept following me. At one point, he followed me. It was for a couple of years in this one place where I lived. I came home one day, he was there, and I mean, it was still fighting for my life. And he brings another woman into my house. That didn't last long. That's when I said that was enough. And I got rid of both of them. Time goes by, my picker's still broke. I'm still online picking up dudes and going to the bar when I'm not working. At that point, I had 2 jobs and I was back into drugs again, selling drugs. And that's how I got by for a few years. One day, my mother and I were trying to repair and trying to send my son back home to me because he was a teenager at this point and he was having some trouble of his own. And she literally dropped him off on my doorstep one day. And so that's how I got my son back in my home. And at this point, he was starting to show some concerning behaviors. I hooked up with this guy, someone that I knew from my childhood. We had ridden the same school bus. That was the beginning of the transformation. In truth, that's when everything started, is when I got with him. Because for the next, I think it was like 2 years. Like, this is how messed up it is in my mind still, because I can't pinpoint when it started and when it stopped. I don't remember when we got together. Because from that point, he was okay. He was quiet. And I never knew what he was really thinking. And then here come the drugs again. And it was like I had been off of crystal and crank, meth, whatever you want to call it. I didn't really want to go back to it. I like to smoke a little smoke every now and then, and that was it. I didn't even drink much, very, very little. Because within 8-9 months, I was so strung out. I'd already lost like 30 or 40 pounds, and we were to the point where we were stealing stuff to sell or trade for more stuff. I had some health problems in those days. I had endometriosis and hemorrhaging. So I was in and out of the doctor a lot. I had 3 surgeries. One of them, the final, was a hysterectomy. They cut in me hip to hip and took everything out. And while I was in the hospital for like 2 days, I think I left on the 3rd day, the nurses wanted to throw him out of the hospital. I was begging him just to stop because he was cruel. It wasn't just physical violence. That hadn't even gotten started good at that point. It was the cruelty, the emotional cruelty, the verbal cruelty, the things he would say to me that would bring me down to nothing. And that's what he was doing in the hospital. And the physical threats were beginning to get a little more real and very scary. Because it wasn't, I'm going to hit you. It was, I'm going to kill you. And I'd been hit a couple of times at that point. My ear is still like, I don't hear good out of my right ear anymore. And that's part of the reason why. And by the time I came home from the hospital, that's when it started getting really bad. Because I couldn't work for 2 months. I mean, I'd been cut hip to hip and gutted like a fish. There's no way I could run a kitchen anymore. My son at this point had he had gone to his dad's to live. I sent him there because I was afraid. I was scared to death that this dude, we're going to call him N, was going to hurt him because my son would stand up for me. And I was scared to death he was going to hurt him. Jake was acting out then too. He was getting into drugs and drinking way too much for a 15-year-old boy. And it was scaring me, the drugs he was getting into and sampling and the things he was doing scared me to death. And I sent him to his dad's. I thought maybe he can teach him how to be a man. I didn't feel like I was a good enough mother for him, that he deserved better. Thankfully, he was not there to see me at my lowest. It's a decision. I don't know if I can regret it or not because it put him in a a better place for a time, because I did get kicked out of my house. I couldn't work. I was the only one that paid the bills. Every time I even mentioned him getting a job, I'd get hit in the face. You can see the scars from one of them. This right here and right there. Let's see, right up under here. There's another one. Those were all times I told him to get a job, or that if he had a job, we wouldn't be in this situation. We got kicked out of the house. We were homeless. Sold everything we had, and I would sell stuff, and I'm good at selling stuff. I'm very good at selling TVs, couches, whatever. We sold it, and had several $100s that I really wanted to take and get a cheap camper somewhere for us to live. I did not want to be on the streets in my middle 30s. It all had to go to drugs. And we put all of our stuff in my grandmother's shed, including the bed. And that's where we lived. We stayed in a couple of places, you know, sleeping on couches, but we couldn't stay long. And I was frightened to stay very long because the physical violence had gotten so real, and I was scared to death he was going to take it out on the person we were staying with. I was afraid it was going to turn to them. So to the shed we went. And at this point, I'm getting hit every day, without fail. The day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, I remember this so very clearly. We had like an old people's potty chair to use the bathroom, and there was an extension cord that would run to a converter in my car, and that's how we had light. And I had a kerosene heater for heat and a propane stove to cook. And I had this camping coffee pot. It's still here somewhere, I think, to make coffee. And I'm one of these, I have to have coffee in the morning. I am stupid without it. So I'm sitting on this potty chair. I had just gotten out of bed. I hadn't even started coffee. It was warm. And we had the door to the shed open. And he's pacing around, and he says, "We ain't turning that heater on, make no damn coffee this morning." I said, "That's fine, I'll use the stove." Hit in the face. Black to the other. I always had a black eye. I've had so many black eyes, like it's permanently stretched out my eyelids. And there went another one, and I'm just like, it didn't even hurt at this point anymore. I was so used to being hit in the face. Some friends wanted to intervene, but they knew it would probably make it worse. That's what I told the nurses at the hospital. It'll make it worse. We'd been in the shed. That was the day after Thanksgiving. We had knockdown drag-outs is what we used to call them. Knockdown, drag out. Picture it. I fought back. I was tired of taking it. I was not used to taking beatings, and I wasn't about to keep taking them. So I started fighting back. And that's one of the nights. I've got this little spot right up here. The hair doesn't grow right, and it's all white there. That's where my head slammed into a 2x4. And then I was kicked in the face. And that was pretty rough. We were going to go to a friend's house to take some showers and fill up our water jugs. And the car got stuck. I had a Mustang. It got stuck in the mud because we had pulled up behind the house to park in front of the shed, and it was stuck, so we couldn't go anywhere. He gets mad at me, even though he's the one that parked the damn car in the first place. We go back in. I sit down on the end of the bed, and he walks in and punches me in the face. That's this one. Let's see if I can, right there I had 4 stitches, right there, and ripped my eyelid off, like part of it. It was dangling. And that was it. That was the last night. I ran. He hit me. I felt the blood running down my face. I was sitting on the edge of that bed and watching through my hair, because my hair was always long. So I'm sitting there like this, watching through my hair, through the blood, for him to move out of the way of that door, because he kept it chained and locked shut with a key in his pocket. He moved. I ran past him, pushed him as hard as I could, and ran for my life through the mud and the muck, and it was raining just a little bit, and I ran for the highway. My intention was to run across the highway and basically play Frogger so he would get hit by a car chasing me, because I was still pretty fast at that point. And he tackled me. I slipped in the mud and fell, and he tackled me. And when he did, he put his knee in my back. I was face down in the mud, grabbed my hair in both of his hands and yanked it back so hard it gave me whiplash. And I screamed. I screamed to the heavens. And somebody heard me. Somebody heard me. The neighbor was taking something to the other neighbor's house, and they were both outside. And I heard them. Do you need us to call the police? Are you in trouble? And I said, yes. And I finally got him off of me. And I took off running again. He tackles me again. I'm still going for the road at this point. He tackles me again. And I was able to get away from him. I think I wore him out at this point because he just sat down. And he finally stopped hitting me. And then he took off hiding, and I went to the neighbor's house. And I remember sitting there looking at him through the dark, and I could feel the blood running down my face. And I said to him, this is not love. You don't do this to people you love. That's when my life started changing. I moved back in with a friend of mine briefly, and then I eventually ended up back at my dad's, and I moved 500 miles away on March 15th, 2015. I went to the Gulf Coast for a couple of years. He was getting out of jail. He was having his kids sending me these messages, and he'd already been out once and went right back to my grandmother's house. I called him over there one day, and I'm still trying to find somebody better, right? Because I was with a guy. I was going over there to check on my stuff, and I was with this dude that I was talking to whenever we saw him in my grandmother's house, because she didn't live there anymore. And then put him back in jail, and he's trying to get in contact with me again when he's getting out, and I can't deal with that. I can't live like this anymore. I'm moving. A friend of mine lived down in Gulf Shores, and I went down there with her. So I'm down in Alabama. I get a job as soon as I get there, a good job, making big money, working on the beach. And I had been dating this guy when I went down there, and he was supposed to follow me. He stopped answering the phone and literally ghosted me because he met somebody else and couldn't bother to tell me. And we'd been in like a relationship, a real one. Like, he had worked on my car and all kinds of stuff. His mom, like, my stuff is still at their house. Like, his mom won't give it back. And a few months go by, and I'm still like trying to live like a teenager and slutting around. I don't see the pattern that is so painfully obvious to everyone else. I meet this guy online, and we hit it off. It was good. We ended up, he moved in with me, and we were happy. At least that's what I thought. He was working, making big money, and he's like, quit your job, I'll take care of you. So I'm a dumbass, and that's what I did. After about 9 months, everything fell apart. And I mean everything. It turns out the whole relationship was built on a lie. There was a big, big thing he never told me, and that was he had some warrants in another state, and I didn't know until the federal marshals showed up and pulled a gun on me. I was picking him up from work one day. I get out of the car, and the next thing I know, there's 8 federal marshals pulling up, throwing him on the ground and pulling a gun on me. When he went back to prison, I made it another year, and eventually I lost my house. The car blew up, and I had nothing. And I had to call my dad to come get me. A 500-mile come and pick me up. Him and my son showed up, and we packed up the U-Haul and headed back to Tennessee. I stuck with him for a couple of years. After he went inside, we were trying to fight his case. And when one day I just said that's enough. I couldn't deal with my life and his. And I had to make a choice. Me or him? Who am I going to live for? My son was spiraling out of control. My daughter is getting ready to graduate from high school. I had to make a choice, and I chose myself. For the next 2 years, I put myself in recovery and recommitted myself to a 12-step program. And the first year in this particular program, there's kind of a rule: no new relationships. And it's to give you time to work on yourself. So I stuck with it for that year. I didn't try to date. I didn't try to sleep around. So as I'm going through the recovery, through the program, and I've got my head straight, and I'm trying to date, and it's just disastrous on every level, I finally said, this is it. That's enough. I'm done. Okay, I'm just done. I'm attracting these weirdos, and I'm not willing at this point to change any of this to become more attractive to another person, because this is what is really there. When all of us are going to get old. We're not going to be young and beautiful and healthy forever. Beauty fades. What's left is in here. And if someone cannot see what's in here, they don't see me at all. So I made a choice to live for myself, to repair the relationships I had damaged during my active addiction. And that's what I've done. And it's taken 6 years for me to get to where I am now, where I can take my daughter on vacation to the beach, to the mountains. We're playing in Colorado this year. It's taken me 6 years to have lunch with my mom. It's taken me 6 years to know I'm awesome and I don't need anybody else to tell me I'm awesome. I choose my life today. And I didn't always do that. I chose everybody else's life. And I was just a player in their game. This is my game. This is my life. And I am choosing to live free and single and make it the best life it can possibly be. I don't need anybody else crowding my space. I don't need anybody else telling me I'm a good person. I don't need somebody else to tell me they love me. I love me. I have fallen madly and completely in love with myself, and I am fine with it. I'm good with it. I am doing things now that I have always wanted to do, and I could never do it because there was always something in the way or somebody telling me I can't do that. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking with me. We've come to the end of the story. Please don't tell me you're sorry about anything. I'm not. All of those experiences, as fucked up as they were, have brought me to where I am today, and I'm good with myself today. I'm good with my life today. I love my life. And I hope I can help you love your life too.